Hello. Hi. Welcome to Unitary Designation. Today I wanted to talk about content creation and art, and one of the risks of art and content being part of the role of the artist is to stay ahead of the curve in terms of like trends. Like fashion predicts how people will look, and there's hit and miss in fashion. And literature mirrors possible pathways forward for our our civilization, our culture. You know, George Orwell, 1984 is one example. Lots of different literature examples. Ibsen, Norwegian author, wrote A Doll's Home, critiquing the role of women in early 19th century society, and whether literature whether art sort of predicts or causes the future unfolding of society is sort of the point of this video, is what I wanted to say. So I was watching Bo Burnham, very talented guy. I like him a lot. He's very good. He has a lot of layered criticism and a lot of insightful points. I like him. He's talented. I was watching his Can't Handle This rant. The link is in the description. I don't want to steal his art. And it got me thinking, like, Bo Burnham is he's a voice of a generation in many ways, whether he wants to be or not. Much like Dylan was hailed as a prophet voice of his generation, whether he wanted to be that or not. And part of the reason why there's a risk to being creative and being outspoken, and the risk is, like, are you causing the dystopian future that you like? A lot of cultural voices right now are being very doomy and gloomy, right? There's zombie apocalypses, there's Bo Burnham's sort of post-apocalyptic sort of style. I think especially his song, one of his songs from his new special Inside is specifically about that. 20,000 years of this, seven more to go, he says. And it's like, is the art a symptom of the disease that is bringing everything to a seeming pointlessness? Or is the art a sort of reflection? Or is it sort of like, are you causing the pointless collapse by inspiring people to think that way through the art and through the literature? It's like, these are multi-layered critique sort of questions. My personal take on it is that there's been a death of meaning, and you and I, assuming you're not something like 130 years old, can both only like guess what it was like to live in like a time when, like, 1830, right, or 1880, when meaning was like what the culture was telling you that meaning was, whether you were filled with a sense of, like, whether you were filled with joy and like drive to get up and produce, or whether you were filled with a kind of nihilistic despair, and whether that depended on your class or your social status or your like class mobility, or whether it just depended on your genetics. We don't know, right? So it's hard to tell if people have always been nihilistic or if it's something's gone more wrong than it was. We've had a death of God, at least in terms of God as this unifying force that directly touched individuals and led the culture. Now it either touches individuals or it's made, or some kind of perverted sort of like traditional form of spiritual wisdom is sort of used to force laws, right? Like in America. And no matter what side of any line you come on any issue, right? Pro-life, pro-choice, or conservative or liberal. The point of the matter, insofar as it relates to cultural values and like the role of the artist, is that there's been a death of meaning, a death of God, and we don't know what it was like before that anymore. Since you can get glimpses of it reading books, but I mean, what it's like to exist today in 2022 is so radically different from what it was like in 2008. I mean, in one sense, nothing's changed. The sky still looks the same, the trees still look the same, people still talk to you, but the feeling you have walking around, and I mean, part of that is me getting older, obviously, but also it's something has changed that it's hard to put your finger on, and it's hard to even remember accurately now. And when artists come forth with songs, or with a Netflix series, or with TV shows, or with movies or books or whatever, or YouTube channels or games, it's all this like sort of subtle nihilism, this sort of like, I'm going to use this term very technically, this postmodernism to mean an era after modernism, a sort of like death of grand narratives, sort of technical meaning to it. It's good or bad, whatever, but and that's a very postmodern attitude, that good and bad is whatever. But the point is, we all have this sort of relativism against towards society and life, even like being itself. We're like, being, non-being, que sera, sera, and it's like, I don't know. I mean, listening to Bo Burnham say 20,000 years of this, 7 more to go, and like, there it is, that funny feeling. It almost seems like, are you causing the collapse, the imminent collapse, or are you like, am I causing it right now by saying it as if it was something that was going to happen? See, the problem with prophecy, the problem with art, is that if you make any prediction, right? You throw spaghetti at the wall, and if something sticks, then you're like, aha, I called it. But if you're doing that with a sense of malice, or a sense of like, I want being to end, or I'm jealous and bitter and resentful and I just want everything to end, and you just keep throwing, it's gonna end, see, I'm telling you it's gonna end, and then you just sort of hype that ending thing up, and then it happens, you're not an artist, you're just an activist that used art, right? And there's a difference. True art is transcendent, and transcendent always serves being. And something that uses art to serve nihilism, or like the demonic, right? The satanic, the being is corrupt and fallen and should be destroyed. That isn't art. Not in my estimation. It's something imitating art. McKenna, Terence McKenna, Terence McKenna, he's hard to class down. He used to say that the way you fight against inauthenticity and against corporate interest and against, this sort of like self-serving attitude that corporations spoon feed us is through art. And I agree with that. And, there's a reason why I surround myself with it. I sort of consume high fantasy and narratives that supply meaning and purpose and grand narratives every day, either through video games or either through communities that are constructed around narratives, like like any subgenre of culture, like the Matrix fans. They have their own narratives, their own heroes that they're agonized. You go to any subreddit for any cultural thing, whether it's Naruto or Metal Gear Solid or Mass Effect or whatever floats your boat here. These are all subgroups that have their own shared narratives and their own meta narratives of like what they recognize as good, canonically good. And they all flock together and they all bask in their shared interests. And there's something very human about that. And the people who critique that notion of like, not that Mass Effect is canonically good or that Metal Gear Solid is canonically good, but that there is such a thing as canonically good. The people who just want to yuck your yum for no reason because they are suffering. Like, misery loves company, and it's getting to the point where it's on a like existential scale, where people just want everything to suck because their life sucks, and that's just so. I mean, it reflects where they are at because it's so basic, and I don't know, it's a whole thing. But the point is, making art that seems to suggest that things have already gone tits up, right? That climate change is not just inevitable and unavoidable, it's already here and it's already going to. Like, we've already fucked up the planet. We've already past the point of no return. You should just give up. There's no point. We tried once and it didn't work. We should just give up. These are so, like, it's so banal. And at a certain point, you're just creating this kind of like mind state in people that spreads like the information age equivalents of like I don't know, a bad fashion fad. You're just creating this sort of doomsday mentality in people, and it masquerades as sophisticated, but it's just not. It's just not in any way. It's shallow. It's unnuanced. It's the rejection of any kind of personal responsibility. Oh, I don't need to try to do anything because it's all tits up. I might as well just dance in the fires that burn. And meanwhile, everything is normal. The sky is blue, trees are green. The world is at your fingertips and all that. But whether it's bad diet or no sleep pattern or just any of the myriad of personal responsibilities that we're not living up to, me included, every day. I don't know. I don't find suffering interesting. I don't find the rejection of responsibilities something to celebrate. I don't know. Maybe I'm just weird and old-fashioned like that, but it just... Artists have a responsibility. They have a responsibility to elevate and to bring more magic and wonder into being than they did before. Something that inspires and brings us closer to heaven rather than further away from it. And, the left and the right have these different subreddits, or called the left can't meme or the right can't meme, where they sort of they mock each other's attempts at creating these kind of like funny spins on whatever's happening. And there's something very authentic that's revealed in that pursuit. That they are trying to reveal that humor is authentic. And so if you are unable to generate humor, you're taking yourself too seriously, ergo your point is invalid. That seems to be something like the logical algorithms towards it. And logical axioms towards it. And like, whether you look at left-wing memes or right-wing memes, the point is that if something can make you laugh and like, that's true, then that's sort of like not true, because a meme is very simplified and it brings out one specific point, often with a lack of context and subtext. But the point is, if something can make you laugh, it's sort of art in a sense. Like, we enjoy stand-up because it makes us laugh and it's hard to do. It's an art form, right? And we enjoy art because it makes us lose ourselves, either through shock or fear or rejoice or like enjoyment or euphoria or whatever it is. Like, something in the art itself causes us to lose our own self, our own sense of like, I'm a thing inside a body and I'm important and I'm gonna die, and me being well off is more important than others being well off. Art makes us lose that. It sort of deconstructs the ego to a certain extent. And the artists often pay a pretty steep price, but that's no excuse to use art to prop up the ego or prop up this kind of resignation. Like, you always have a responsibility to a certain degree of trying to be a better person than you were yesterday. Always. I mean, that's not any like ideology speaking. That's just that's just been the common human ethos since forever. Like, that's just genes adapting to environments. That's just being. Being is always getting more and more complex. Like, new atoms are made, new sort of systems build on old previous systems. Like, at least on Earth, that's been the dominant driving force. And until you can prove to me that I think complexity should be favored from its absence. I think biology should be favored to its absence. So unless you can argue compellingly that, no art is better than art, or that no biology is better than biology, or that no complexity is better than complexity, unless you can make that argument, say in the comments or, on your own video, then, I think you should defer to trying to create more and more new, interesting things, whatever you happen to find interesting or good. Plato said that the world strived towards the good, the true, and the beautiful. And he categorized it in those three terms. The good was something that you inherently recognize as morally virtuous, as good. The true was something that, while not necessarily good, was it was true. It was information that wasn't subject to falsification. It was information like, that's a tree. It will always be a tree. It won't change from being a tree. That is true. 2 and 2 is 4. That is true. It won't change, irrespective of circumstances. And the beautiful. And he included the beautiful in this tripartite structure of being. And that's very interesting, because the beautiful is a gateway through which fashion, through which, the beauty industry, through which art, through which, art suffices, through which art informs us. And if we let art be politicized, not in Bo Burnham's case, but in sort of, the internet is very potent, right? And memes are very potent, because if something can make you laugh by ignoring context, I'm not going to give any specific examples of this, but any politically tense situation that you want to laugh at the other side, you're willing to ignore a lot of mitigating context, and anyone who brings out the context you will call them a party pooper. And so it's sort of too sad to talk about, because anyone who's willing to bend art to their political purpose is already like, unless your political purpose is everyone getting along well, which is what art ultimately brings about anyways. Everyone who has their egos deconstructed, let's say through art or through meditation or through just being a cool person, everyone who has their egos deconstructed end up wanting everyone to get along anyways. So there's nothing political about that in a sense. Political is like, given that we aren't all getting along, I want this subsection of people to get that subsection of resources. That's basically what politics are. How to get along with other people who are basically insane, given that you're insane too. That's politics. And art is like the attempt to, hey, let's not be insane. And people will often go like, hey, you artists, should I kill you? Would that be cool? And it's like, oh, okay, we're like, to the level that we tolerate art, that's the extent to which we're not insane. So if someone hates humor, or like hates comedy, or hates art, or hate music, they're usually to be avoided. But anyways, I digress. All that was a gigantic rant away from the main point. The main point was that artists have a responsibility to tell a, not necessarily a hopeful message, but a message that isn't just revelatory or resigning. If you resign to the fact that everything is doomed, are you just causing the doomed? Like, then it's not art anymore. It doesn't inspire us. It's sort of, we have to live up to a higher standard than you thought us capable of, so that you won't be depressed, to create the depressing art. And that's not art, because you're no longer doing us a favor. You're doing us, like, we have to carry you. So it's like, I don't know if this is a personal attack on Bo Burnham or just a meditation on this kind of neo-nihilistic postmodern art. Another example from the 70s is Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd has an album called The Wall, where they're telling the story of Pink, this rock star, depressed guy who goes through a abusive childhood, an alienating school system, becomes a musician to try to live out some aspect of his authenticity, becomes a heroin addict. That's what Comfortably Numb is about. And then towards the end of the album, The Wall is sentenced to be exposed before his peers by this sort of like arbitrary court. And then after that, the wall is sort of torn down. And he gets to the point of the character in the Wall album, Pink, gets to the point of this. He gets to a point of illusion and depravity where he doesn't remember having built a wall around him and the world. This sort of wall of falsehood and alienation we all put up to protect ourselves from the world. He says there must have been a door there in the wall when I came in. Like, he's so deluded he doesn't remember making the wall himself. And that's sort of where most of humans are, and we just think that's the way it's supposed to be. And then at the end of the album, the wall is broken. And then he says, isn't this where? And then the album starts on the first track with where we came in. It just sort of repeats ad nauseum, like a cyclical manner. And that's art, and it's supposed to be reminding you that, you know, life is short, it's brief, it's sort of history repeats, it's futile, and don't alienate yourself, right? But it can also be read as sort of like nothing matters, there's no point, it's all just going to repeat, a new generation will come, they will alienate themselves. But see, this is the point of the video. Sometimes art can be descriptive. It can paint a very bleak picture, but it can paint a bleak picture to inform you that there's a way out. And other times, art can just be about sort of celebrating that everything is ending. And I don't think that's very Hinduist in a way. It's sort of like Kali Yuga art. Like, if you haven't heard it before, I recommend you check out Bo Burnham's song from the album Inside, this funny feeling. The song is called That Funny Feeling. And it's sort of that. It's sort of like a song around a campfire after a war. It sort of seems post-apocalyptic, but there hasn't been an apocalypse yet. And there's no need for an apocalypse. There doesn't need to be a nuclear war. There doesn't need to be a gigantic financial collapse. Like, we can navigate through this. We've been through worse. Like in the 60s, in the Cuban Missile Crisis, we were a button push away from nuclear annihilation. And here we are. So the fact that, like, you know, lattes are expensive and people rent instead of owning, like, we can navigate this stuff. It's not beyond our powers to navigate. But for artists to basically throw in the towel and be like, nah, there's no point, rhyme, or reason. It's over, it's GG, you know, it's just, we didn't come this far, right? To just throw in the towel? As a species, I mean, we didn't come this far just to let some kind of, I don't know what postmodernism is in the final analysis. Is it a French intellectual trend? Is it a response to the death of meaning? Is it a neuroinflammatory response to diets? Like, I don't know, but the point is we didn't come this far to just throw in the towel because some, you know, sort of pretentious intellectuals said everything can be interpreted every way. Like, nihilism, Nietzschean nihilism, isn't... If it was going to end us, it would have ended us already. The fact that we can conceive of it doesn't mean that it's true. Or even if it is true, it doesn't mean that it's functional or adaptive. Let's say every one of us who is predisposed to nihilism. We all go out in a cold whimper, right? Well, the people, the individuals among us, maybe there's 1,000 of them, maybe there's 100,000, but the individuals among us who isn't subject to nihilism will just live on. They'll just keep going. And then evolution will have honed us out. And all you would have done was subscribe to something that didn't work hard enough to die from it. Selection would have just ruled you out. So it's not adaptive. And in this universe, there's only one platonic truth, and that's in that competitive sense, and that's adaptation. Whatever is adaptively useful gets to keep living, and that means more copies of that goes on into the future. The fourth dimension, Einsteinian time. It's preserved, and if you don't want to keep going, keep your genes going, then you were just selected out. So like, don't celebrate your resignation as if it makes you a hero. It just doesn't. If you have to go out, go out. We'll miss you. Sorry to hear that. Wish you could have stayed, but I don't know what to tell you. It's not adaptive. It's not something to set as an example. So I guess that's the point of this video. To the artists, if you can't make art that inspires us to a transcendent state, then at least don't make art that boasts up the ego or celebrates resignation. Sorry if that seems abstract and vaguely, but I felt like making this video, so I'm glad you watched. Hope you're having a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Take care.